Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the stories we have lined up for you tonight. Alberta teachers are forced to return to class, but their union says it's exploring any and all legal challenges. A petition for Alberta to stay in Canada reaches over 450,000 signatures, surpassing the required amount to initiate a possible referendum. Ahead of Remembrance Day, the city of Lethbridge paints a commemorative crosswalk to honor veterans.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the Alberta government has used legislation to end a strike by teachers. The teachers union says this is just the beginning. Bill 2, the Back to School Act, was tabled late Monday and passed third reading early Tuesday. The legislation forces teachers back to work as early as Wednesday by imposing a collective agreement and invoking the Notwithstanding clause to shield the government from court challenges for the duration of the 4-year deal. The bill imposes on teachers a previous deal, which they had already overwhelmingly rejected, a 12% wage hike over 4 years and a promise to hire 3,000 more teachers. Tuesday afternoon, the president of the Alberta Teachers Association spoke about how teachers are feeling and what's next.
They're upset, they're frustrated, they are offended at the disrespect that this government has put in place for using the Notwithstanding clause. So my expectation of what I think my members are doing today is that they're grieving. They're healing from this. They're processing the feelings of yesterday. We cannot underscore or underestimate the gravity of this decision that this government made yesterday. Not only to use the Notwithstanding clause, but to ram it through the legislature in the way that they did, to limit debate in the way that they did. Teachers will comply with the law, but make no mistake, compliance is not consent. The association will fight this abuse of power with every tool the law provides and every ounce of conviction we possess. We will pursue every legal avenue in every forum to reclaim the rights and freedoms this government has torn away. We will challenge this legislation in the courts, in our communities, and the very conscience of Albertans. While the government may have ended the strike, they have not ended the crisis in Alberta's classrooms. Our schools will reopen tomorrow, but the same overcrowded classrooms, the same lack of supports, the same underfunding will still be waiting for teachers and students. Nothing in Bill 2 changes that reality.
School boards around the province have sent messages to parents saying classes will be back in session on Wednesday and bus services will resume. A group calling itself the Common Front, which is an umbrella group for all Alberta unions representing about 350,000 workers, has sent a letter to Premier Danielle Smith. It says the use of the Notwithstanding clause escalates the situation from a confrontation between the government and the teachers to a confrontation between the government and the entire Canadian labour movement.
When rights become optional, they cease to be rights. And when we lose our rights, we lose our democracy. So this is not just a fight about the teachers. They have made it something much bigger than that. It's now become a fight about worker rights, about our standard of living, because this is the way governments drive down wages and our standard of living. But it's also become a fight about our democracy.
Alberta's opposition leader also had some fierce words concerning Tuesday morning's vote. NDP leader Naheed Nenshi called out Danielle Smith regarding her early departure to the Middle East. Here is what he had to say.
The Premier is a coward. Not only did she refuse to negotiate with teachers, not only did she refuse to end this weeks ago using the powers she already had, she didn't even show up for the debate. The first premier in Alberta history to say, I am knowingly passing a law which is unconstitutional. And I'm doing it on purpose because I don't care about your rights. And she didn't even show up. She couldn't be bothered to delay her Saudi Arabian junket. Maybe she needs to learn more about authoritarianism. She's a pretty good study. She couldn't even be bothered to delay her Saudi Arabian junket by a few hours to at least stand up in the legislature and at least explain to Albertans why she doesn't believe their human rights matter. She is a coward, and her government members are also cowards.
We have heard a lot about this notwithstanding clause after the UCP introduced Bill 2 ordering striking teachers back to work. The clause found in Section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms allows federal or provincial governments to pass a law even if it conflicts with certain rights in the Charter, such as freedom of expression, religion, or equality. University of Calgary law professor Howard Kitzlowitz explains how long a notwithstanding clause can remain in effect.
When a legislature uses the notwithstanding clause, so when they put in a provision like that, it can only last for 5 years, but it can be renewed. There's no limit on how many times it can be renewed, but there is a requirement that it be renewed at least every 5 years. In the absence of a notwithstanding clause, for example, this back-to-work legislation could have been challenged on the basis that it unjustifiably interfered with freedom of association. That's the right that's usually relevant in the labor context. And if that argument was successful, then a court could have struck down the law, make it as if the law never existed. But with a notwithstanding clause that is at least much more limited, so there's no possibility of invalidation, there is some question about whether a court could offer its opinion on whether the law violated the Charter of Rights if it didn't have a notwithstanding clause in it. There's division among various courts of appeal on that question. But at the very least, we know that for the time that the notwithstanding clause is part of the law cannot be invalidated, which means that there's no way through the courts to undo the law.
Alberta used the notwithstanding clause in 2000 to pass an anti-same-sex marriage legislation. Quebec used it in 2019 to prevent the wearing of religious symbols by public employees in positions of authority. That legislation, along with the clause, was renewed for another 5 years in 2024. A referendum question on Alberta staying in Canada is one step closer to getting approved. Former Alberta Deputy Premier Thomas Lukaszuk began circulating the Forever Canadian petition 3 months ago. It started as a counter to separatists who want a referendum on Alberta independence. On Tuesday, Lukaszuk announced the final tally.
Not only did we meet the required target of 300,000 signatures, but we have actually just blown past that. And we are now at, are you ready? Yes! 456,365. So today we will be turning over these boxes from all over Alberta, and by the way, somebody just handed in 23 more signatures, so add that to it, to our Chief Electoral Commissioner. Our Chief Electoral Commissioner will do what he has to do. He will tabulate this petition, and he will finally certify it and turn it to the Alberta Legislature.
It's too early to speculate on anything now. Elections Alberta review the signatures, review the accuracy and completion of the petition, and then make recommendations to us as to whether it needs to proceed. Once it does, we'll sit down with Cabinet and Caucus, assess what our next steps are, and we'll go from there. But right now, it's too early to speculate.
Over the weekend, thousands of Albertans in support of separation showed up at the legislature for a rally held by the Alberta Prosperity Project. The APP says they want to kickstart their own petition on whether Alberta should secede from Canada and become a sovereign, independent country. The question will go through the courts to determine its constitutionality before votes can be gathered. In federal politics, the Conservatives are calling on other parties to support legislation that would combat intimate partner violence. Bill C-225, introduced by Conservative MP Frank Caputo, would automatically make the killing of an intimate partner an act of first-degree murder and prohibit the release of an individual arrested for intimate partner violence if they are a repeat offender. The bill has been dubbed Bailey's Law, named after Bailey McCourt, who was murdered in July by her estranged ex-husband in Kelowna, British Columbia. He had been released after being convicted of uttering threats.
We have been counting every day since Bailey was murdered and watching and seeing the number of women murdered, and we are demanding change. There's no need to wait. This is an epidemic, and we fully support Bill C-225, Bailey's Law. We're so grateful to Mr. Caputo for honoring Bailey's name, and we're going to continue to push for change. And we are hopeful that the community, write your MPs, ask your MPs to support this bill. It needs to be passed quickly. There's no need to wait. The next person could be you, or it could be one of your family members, and we don't want to see any other family member go through the horror that our family has gone through.
Henderson says she and members of the McCourt family will be meeting with Justice Minister Sean Fraser on Wednesday. Bailey's father, Shane McCourt, says the current laws failed his daughter, and those laws need to change. A group calling itself the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition held a news conference in Ottawa Tuesday, calling on members of Parliament to support Bill C-218. The private members' bill was introduced by Conservative MP Tamara Jensen earlier this year. It would block the expansion of medical assistance in dying or MAID in those whose sole condition is mental illness. MAID would be available to those people beginning in 2027. The coalition's president says while Canadians may believe MAID is a choice, a person is consenting to a doctor's proposition of medical homicide.
Please notice that I very deliberately say consenting to a doctor's proposition of medical homicide. For although ordinary people may still mistakenly believe that patients must themselves spontaneously request euthanasia, that is not how medicine works. It is the doctor who informs patients of available options and then steers them towards whichever one he or she believes to be best. Candidly speaking, it is this aggressive marketing of death as medical treatment which has turned a few hundred expected MAID cases into over 16,000 in 2024 alone. And it also explains recent stories of people in acute psychiatric distress desperately seeking institutional help, who are then professionally informed of their eligibility to be killed in that place by doctors.
Medically assisted death was legalized in Canada in 2016. It now accounts for 1 in 20 deaths in this country. In commemoration of Remembrance Day and to honor Canadian veterans, City of Lethbridge crews have begun installing a painted crosswalk near City Hall. The crosswalk is located at 4th Avenue South between 10th and 11th Street South near the Cenotaph. Crews will detour traffic during installation and drying for the next couple of days, weather permitting. The design selected by the Lethbridge Legion features a soldier's silhouette inspired by the Cenotaph statue, along with the phrase, "Lest we forget" in English and the phrase, "so that we know" in Blackfoot and in French. The crosswalk follows a trend of Albertan and Canadian municipalities installing veteran commemorative crosswalks, with Medicine Hat holding a ceremonial event this past Sunday after installing one near their City Hall. The Lethbridge crosswalk, according to some of the workers, will be in place for the next 3 years. After that, the city will review whether they want to keep it around indefinitely. This upcoming weekend is one that many Canadians dread. Early Sunday morning, we all move our clocks back 1 hour from daylight saving to standard time. Although you may think you gain an hour's sleep, the time change can actually mess up your sleep.
Experts say the seasonal time shift can be hard on your body by disrupting your circadian rhythm. That's the 24-hour cycle that determines when we become sleepy and when we're more alert.
It's a 24-hour clock, or a near 24-hour clock, that needs to get synchronized to our 24-hour day.
There are ways to help your body ease into the time change.
When you wake up, get that light, and that'll help accelerate the switch faster. If you can, go outside. If not, try to be in a brightly lit room as much as possible, or sit by a window. This will help facilitate kind of shifting your clock faster in the fall. You can move your clock earlier if it's something that is difficult. You can kind of move it, you can do the fall back like 15 minutes, a night for a couple of nights preceding it.
Some health groups have long advocated to do away with time change altogether. New data recently released from Stanford University agrees.
If we transition to constant year-long daylight saving time, that's better. But what's even better than that is transitioning to year-long standard time.
Some experts believe sticking with standard time aligns better with the sun and your body's natural rhythm.
Well, she is a Canadian music icon and a legend, but surprisingly, Anne Murray is not in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Monday night at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, a tribute was held to honor her career, and there are many who say this oversight needs to be corrected.
A gentleman walked up to me tonight and he said, I'm working on getting Anne Murray in the Hall of Fame. Do you know she's not in there, the Country Music Hall of Fame? And I said, I had no idea. We have Hank Snow. Hank Snow is in there, but Anne is not. And so I think it's understandable why sometimes the world keeps turning and people might maybe overlook something. And perhaps in some way, somebody just didn't quite pay attention to what but I'll tell you what, after this and after what's going on in her, she just re-released a whole bunch of new music that's, once you stop and think for a moment what Anne Murray has done and what she's created, I think there's probably no question that she's headed for the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Oh, I know she should be in the Hall of Fame. They should be ashamed of herself not having her in there. And if it's up to me, I will do whatever I can to get her in the Country Music Hall of Fame here in the United States.
Her music should definitely be something that my generation can align with. A lot of people in my generation describe themselves as old souls, and they love old music and finding vinyl. And I mean, in Nova Scotia especially, every vinyl store, many stores around have Anne Murray vinyls, and I have a lot of them, and that's my favorite way to listen to Anne Murray.
Tricia Yearwood was one of the artists who honored Anne Murray at Monday's event in Nashville. Yearwood said her junior high self was freaking out performing in front of an artist whose music was, quote, the fabric of our lives. So sweet. By the way, Anne Murray is a huge Blue Jays fan, and she has said that she's been watching the World Series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's doubtful, though, that the 80-year-old stayed up for Monday night's nearly 7-hour, 18-inning marathon that was Game 3 of the World Series. The Jays lost 6-5 on a walk-off home run by Freddie Freeman.
I love the way we played. I love the way we fought. I think every single player had the right intentions on both sides tonight. There's a lot of things you look at. We had chances to score. They had chances to score. Yeah, a lot to digest. You know what I mean? But I think turning point's obviously a walk-off homer. But man, I give my guys so much credit for playing the way they did, and Eric Lauer pitching the way he pitched. That's pretty unbelievable. I know Klein did the same thing for them, but a lot to unpack in that game. But I couldn't feel as good as I do right now about the way they went about it.
Yeah, it tests your mental toughness for sure. You find a way to lock in each time you go out on defense, and you try to find a way to get on base for the boys when you're hitting. But that not every day you play 18 innings, so you just kind of figure it out as you go.
I, for one, did not see the full 7 hours. That's a lot of baseball. Please don't judge. The Canadian pension plan is being accused of failing to properly factor in climate risk when making investments. 4 young Canadians filed a lawsuit against Canada's largest pension fund today, claiming it's breaching its duty to invest in their best interest and subjecting their contributions to undue risk of loss by its approach. The lawsuit was filed with the support of EcoJustice and Goldblatt Partners, claiming CPP Investments is underestimating the financial implications of climate change while worsening its harms by investing in the expansion of fossil fuel production. A CPP Investments spokesperson says the fund is still working to assess the lawsuit, but remains steadfast in integrating climate-related considerations into its investment activity. Saskatchewan farming groups are calling on the federal government to create an export sales reporting program. The Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan and Sask Crops say the program would provide more information to help farmers make decisions on what to grow. The groups say Canadian farmers are at a disadvantage as the United States and European Union have their own reporting systems. They've cited a study that says the Canadian program could generate returns of $56 million for farmers. Amazon says it will cut about 14,000 corporate jobs as it increases investment in artificial intelligence. The move is part of an ongoing effort to streamline operations and shift resources toward key growth areas. Senior Vice President Beth Galetti says the cuts aim to reduce bureaucracy and focus on customer needs. Affected teams and employees were notified on a Tuesday. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 143 to 30,419. The Dow was up 161 to 47,706. The S&P 500 was up 15 to 6,890, and the Nasdaq was up 109 to 23,827. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.13 to $60.18 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 19 cents to $3.25 US. Gold was down $29.41 to $39.5212 US an ounce, and silver was up 23 cents to $47.05 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.21 per bushel, barley is at $5.61, canola is at $14.29, and corn is at $7.32 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.35 to $227.50. Feeder cattle were down $1.40 to $3.44.10. And lean hog's December contract was down 67 cents to $80.82. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 71.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, while the Alberta government has used legislation to end a strike by teachers, the teachers' union says this is just the beginning. The legislation forces teachers back to work as early as Wednesday by imposing a collective agreement and invoking the Notwithstanding clause to shield the government from court challenges for the duration of the 4-year deal. The bill imposes on teachers a previous deal which they had already overwhelmingly rejected, a 12% wage hike over 4 years and a promise to hire 3,000 more teachers. Ontario Premier Doug Ford's anti-tariff ad campaign continues to make waves as Ford has revealed that Prime Minister Mark Carney and his chief of staff saw the ad before it aired, which led to Trump ending any more trade talks with Canada. Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly will shed some light on what happened behind the scenes on that and other Canadian political issues. That's coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.